The wind tore across the plains like a hungry ghost, rattling the trees and lifting drifts of snow into the air. 12-year-old Caleb Thomas pulled his coat tighter as he trudged through the frozen field toward the barn, arms full of hay. He was used to winter's cruelty, he'd grown up with it, but something felt different this morning. That's when he saw her. A small figure lay crumpled at the edge of the fence, half buried in snow. Caleb's boots crunched as he ran to her side, heart pounding. She was barely breathing. A girl, no older than him, dark hair matted with ice, skin pale and cracked from the cold. Her thin dress offered no warmth. Her lips were blue, her eyes glassy with exhaustion. Caleb didn't hesitate. He pulled the wool blanket from his own back, his only one, the last gift from his late mother, and wrapped it tightly around her shivering body. His fingers trembled, but not from the cold. "You're gonna be okay," he whispered, brushing snow from her face. He carried her into the barn, laying her gently in the hayloft, where it was warmest. He lit the old iron stove, warmed a bowl of soup, and sat beside her as the wind screamed outside. She never said a word, just stared at him with eyes full of something between fear and disbelief. Caleb didn't need her to speak. In his heart, he already knew, she hadn't just been cold, she had been forgotten. And he wasn't going to let that happen again. For the first 2 days, the girl didn't speak. Caleb brought her food, bread, broth, dried apples, whatever he could sneak from the kitchen without raising his father's suspicion. He checked on her between chores, whispering things like, "It's okay now," and "You're safe here," even though he wasn't sure she believed him. He didn't even know her name. On the 3rd day, just as dawn was breaking, she finally whispered it, "Nayeli." Her voice was dry and cracked like old paper. She told him little, but enough. She was Lakota. Her village had been attacked, scattered, burned. She'd run for days without food, hiding in woods and ditches, until her legs gave out in the cold. She hadn't expected to wake up. Caleb listened, eyes wide. He'd heard stories, ugly stories, about Indians, but his father had told him not to trust everything people said. "Judge a person by how they treat you, not by where they come from," he'd said once. He looked at her then, not as a stranger, not as an enemy, but as a scared kid like himself. Someone who'd lost too much, too soon. He offered her a slingshot he'd carved and shared stories of fishing with his mom before she died. A smile flickered on Nayeli's face, small and unsure, but real. As days passed, they found comfort in silence and friendship in gestures. She began to trust him. He already trusted her. Outside, the town grew colder. Inside the barn, something rare was growing, understanding. It had been over a week since Caleb found Nayeli, and life moved on quietly. On the surface, at least. He continued his chores, fed the livestock, answered his father's questions with a practiced nod. But every spare moment he had, he spent with her, bringing her books to look at, warm food, or just sitting in silence. She was healing, slowly. Her cheeks no longer looked hollow. Her voice had strength again. But Caleb noticed the townspeople had begun to whisper. A few had seen footprints around the barn. A neighbor mentioned hearing something one night. Caleb's father even asked if he'd seen anything unusual. Caleb just shook his head. He wasn't ready to explain. Not yet. Then, one night, as snow fell thick and quiet, Nayeli reached for the wool blanket draped around her shoulders. Her fingers brushed its edge gently, and she asked, "Why did you give this to me? You needed it too." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "Because you were colder than I was," he said simply. She blinked, and something in her eyes shifted, like a wall falling away. That moment, more than any other, was when she believed he wasn't just helping her, he saw her. Neither of them knew that hundreds of miles away, her people had been searching. And somewhere along the way, they'd heard whispers of a white boy who gave up everything to save a dying Lakota girl. And they were already on their way. It was just after sunrise when Caleb stepped out of the barn with an armful of firewood and froze. His breath caught in his throat. Across the snow-covered field stood a long, silent line of figures, tall, still, and wrapped in furs and feathers. Warriors. Hundreds of them. They stretched across the horizon, shoulder to shoulder, unmoving. Caleb's heart thudded in his chest. He glanced back at the barn, where Nayeli was still sleeping. Had they come for her? Was she in danger? Then one man broke from the line and walked forward. His presence was powerful, but his eyes were calm. He removed a great feathered headdress and held it in both hands, walking slowly to Caleb. The boy didn't move. The warrior stopped just a few feet away, then knelt and placed the headdress at Caleb's feet, an offering, a gesture of honor. "You gave her more than warmth," the man said, voice deep and quiet. "You gave her life when the world turned its back. You showed her the spirit of a good heart." Caleb's eyes burned, but he didn't cry. He simply nodded, unable to speak. Behind the warrior, all 700 men stood in solemn silence. Not to intimidate, but to pay their respect. Nayeli stepped out of the barn, blankets still around her shoulders. When she saw them, her lips parted in awe. It was a moment that would be remembered for generations, the day a child's kindness brought a tribe to its knees in gratitude. Years passed, but Caleb never forgot that morning. The way the snow glistened in the sunrise, the silence of 700 warriors standing in the cold, the weight of the headdress at his feet. That moment had changed him. Nayeli returned to her people not long after. There were no goodbyes, just a long embrace and a promise that their paths would cross again. Caleb watched her ride away, the wool blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, now a symbol of something far greater than warmth. Every winter after that, without fail, a blanket arrived at Caleb's door. Each one handmade by different Lakota women, woven with symbols of peace, stitched with colors of the earth, and always accompanied by a simple note, "We remember." As he grew older, Caleb became known not just in his small town but across the state. He spoke at gatherings, helped build bridges between settler families and tribal communities. He told his story not for praise but to remind others of what a single moment of kindness could do. He never claimed to be a hero. When asked why he did it, he always said, "Because she was cold and I had a blanket. That's all." But it was never just a blanket. It was hope in the darkest hour, dignity offered without judgment, a quiet reminder that compassion needs no permission. And long after his voice faded, the story lived on, passed from campfires to classrooms, carried like a prayer stitched in wool.